So, I'm sure you've heard about Dungeons and Dragons within the last several years, and I'm sure that you have got a pretty good idea of what it is, but I'm telling you, you don't know enough. Dungeons and Dragons was invented by Gary Gygax and David Arneson in 1976, and has gone through more than a few changes since then. Originally, it was fairly complicated, and that drove away most people. However, the 5th edition rules that were introduced in 2014 have made the game a lot more simple and a lot more fun for people to join in. 2020 was especially huge for D&D because of the pandemic, with everyone trapped inside and innovation being and having nothing to do
Social distance.
with social distancing. Uh, Technologies.
You good. Innovations in technology.
Innovations in technology allowed Dungeons and Dragons to be played online. Because of that, the rise in popularity caused an increase of 33% in growth of sales in just that year, which made it the best year for Dungeons and Dragons so far. Today, around 50 million people around the world have played Dungeons and Dragons. Dungeons and Dragons is more than just playing pretend. It's like writing a story together. You can do practically anything, but it's not random. As mentioned before, there are in fact rules that help facilitate what your characters do. I'm going to teach you some of these rules so that maybe in the future you can understand a bit more about this gaming phenomenon. Prepare yourself, because there's quite a lot. As a player, what is your role? Well, one of the first things you do as a player is create a character. And one of the first things you do in creating a character is choosing your class. There are 14 different classes, including Barbarian, Bard, Cleric, Fighter, Ranger, Rogue, just to name a few. And each of these classes has a number of subclasses, which are unique and change how you play that class. As a rogue, you can play the silent thief, the swashbuckling pirate, or a criminal mastermind. It all depends on how you want to play. Another aspect of character creation is choosing your race. There are standard races like humans, elves, and dwarves, but there are also more exotic races like half-orcs, dragonborn, and tieflings. And there are many, many more besides, both officially and unofficial. I think the most important aspect of creating a character is your backstory. Giving your character a solid backstory grounds them within the universe. It makes it easier to understand their motivations and how they would act in certain situations, which may be completely different from how you, the player, would act. Unlike writing a story on your own, your character has to live alongside other characters that you do not control, which makes it more dynamic. As the player, there are two responsibilities you have. Role-playing can be a huge part of the experience. Whether you're goofing around or trying to really develop your character, it is always more fun when you completely immerse yourself. Your other job as the role player is to work with the dungeon master or the DM. The DM is your guide through this experience, so it is in your best interest to work with them, not against. As the dungeon master, what is your job? Your job is to set the stage. Everything that happens because you allow it. It is your job to decide how the world reacts to what the players do. What makes the game interesting and exciting are the various challenges that you can hit your players with. Nothing should be so straightforward that your players are bored, but nothing should be so challenging that they are frustrated and feel ganged up on. That being said, your players should never feel as if they've been backed into a corner. While actions should have consequences, your job is not railroading your characters to fit your narrative, but to facilitate their imaginations. To that end, preparation is key. As the DM, a large part of your job is preparing the world for your players, anticipating the direction that they want to go in, and preparing characters, situations, and challenges for them to face. To that end, you should know a bit about the world and its various cultures and mythologies, legends, and histories. There are significant events that have happened within the official lore that can be useful to you as the Dungeon Master. And more than anything, it is all very customizable. The rules are more like guidelines. There's nothing that can't be tweaked, stretched, or adjusted to better suit you and your players. And what are the mechanics of Dungeons and Dragons? Well, it all revolves around the dice. There are stats and modifiers that your characters have. The 6 core stats, strength, dexterity, constitution, intelligence, wisdom, and charisma, are all very important. You roll dice to determine how strong you are in each category when you create your character, and each category tells you how proficient you are in the various skills. Depending on the score for your stat, you can add what is called a modifier when you roll a die to perform some action. The dice help structure what will almost certainly be a chaotic experience. Anytime you roll a die, it is to determine the outcome of some action that has been taken. If you want to read through a book to research some spell, you would have to roll an investigation check in order to see how much knowledge your character has gleaned. If you want to scale a building, you might have to roll an athletics or an acrobatics check, which depend on strength or dexterity. One of the more complicated aspects of Dungeons & Dragons is the combat. The first thing you do in combat is determine the initiative order, or the turn order. Everyone rolls a 20-sided die, which has which the highest number goes first, and so on. So every round in combat is 6 seconds long within the game. A round starts at the top of the initiative order and restarts when the last character finishes their turn. Everything that happens within that round happens within the span of 6 seconds of game time, so that 10 rounds of combat equates to about 1 minute of non-combat. I hope you were taking notes, because that's quite a lot. But hopefully now you know a bit more about the game Dungeons & Dragons. There's quite a bit more than what I've just explained, and Wizards of the Coast tweaks things often to make the game more enjoyable. Dungeons & Dragons has had a resurgence within the last few years, and modern technology has made the game much more accessible for the mainstream. After listening to this, I hope the next time you hear about Dungeons & Dragons, you are more aware about the exact nature of the game.
Thank you.
Thank you.